Hello to all our listeners and viewers. This is our fifth in a series of interviews with experts in the field of climate change and migration in Cyprus. Our aim is to inform as many young people of the interconnections between climate change and migration. These podcasts are created in the context of the project End Climate Change, Start Climate of Change by the University of Nicosia Research Foundation. Today's invited speaker is Mr. Kyriakos Parpounas, Head of Sustainability at Grant Thornton, Cyprus. Mr. Parpounas holds a degree in civil engineering with a specialization in environmental engineering at the University of Maine, an MBA in finance from Texas A&M University, and is a PhD candidate at the University of Cyprus in sustainability and corporate social responsibility. For 25 years, Kyriakos Parpounas has held senior management positions in Cyprus's construction industry and waste management industry. During the majority of that time, he has been the general manager of several significant organizations here in Cyprus. In 2005, Mr. Parpounas was selected by the Cypriot industry to develop the collective extended producer responsibility scheme for packaging in Cyprus. During the 12 years of his executive service for the development of EPR in Cyprus, he gained extensive knowledge and experience in all the aspects of EPR organizations. In 2017, he created Parpounas Sustainability Consultants and is active internationally as a consultant in the development of waste management systems with a presence in 10 countries. Mr. Parpounas has recently taken on the significant role of Head of Sustainability at Grant Thornton, Cyprus. Kyriakos, hello, and thank you so much for being here with us today to share your vast experience.
Thank you very much, and thanks for inviting me.
It's a pleasure. Couldn't we start from the offset? What is Head of Sustainability at Grant Thornton?
It's a new role. Mm-hmm. It's a new development, a development that we see in many of the professional consulting organizations. And of course, it reflects the effort done mostly in the European Union, I should say, to actually redesign the models for business. And I intentionally say redesign because we're talking about a new strategy. We're not talking about because the CSR term has been abused a lot. It's been used for greenwashing without really doing things but saying different things about what companies were doing. Whereas, and I think the biggest fallacy is that when you talk about CSR, you talk about spending money. People think, okay, if somebody tells me to do something for CSR, it means spending money. When in reality, CSR is about the way that the company makes the money, not the way it spends the money. It's about being responsible in the way they do business and then returning also back to the society through whatever profits they are made. So what we're doing at Grant Thornton is developing solutions for different industries, but also for any other company, for strategic revision and changes in the strategy to turn the business model into a more sustainable or a sustainable model. And eventually talking also about regulated industries which have already a number of obligations with different regulations that they have to fulfill. So we will be in a position to guide all these organizations with tools, with electronic tools, and of course the consulting and the experience that we have and we are building within to make this transformation. And at the end of the day, those who want to also report what they are doing, we help them to prepare their reports. But for us, it's a strategic issue. It's not just a report.
Okay, that's really interesting, particularly the issues that CSR has had. Probably historically with some interesting milestones. The Enron case comes to mind, of course. But in terms of corporate structure, where does sustainability as a department lie? I mean, is it under a communications department? Is it its own separate unit within a corporate structure? I mean, how does that work?
Well, of course, each organization is different, so
Sure.
it could be in a different place in the structure. But the essence is to be strategic. The essence is to be to have the sustainability, the person in charge, the department to be in all the key decisions. He's like sitting with the CEO and the board to decide what to do about the way the business is run. So I would have concerns, for example, if I only find CSR under a communications department, but it doesn't mean it's wrong. It depends on how you actually use it. We're talking about strategy, so we're talking about a vision, a mission, KPIs, all should reflect this changing in the direction of the organization. So in essence, I would not just look at where the department is, but I would look at the vision, the mission, and the targets of the company to see if indeed they have integrated sustainability issues. And of course, when we talk about strategy, we talk about the power of saying no. When you're strategic, you know when you have to say no, because this is not the business of the organization. So in essence, I was saying recently in a discussion we had that the essence is to get to a point where when we evaluate a new product or a new service, and even if this new product or service will make money for the company, but it will violate environmental and social issues, to have the power to say, no, we will not do it, although it will make money. That's where we're moving into strategic sustainability way of operating, let's say.
That's a great example. And it also gives emphasis to the self-regulatory nature of sustainability departments, I would assume, within organizations. I mean, this isn't something that's forced upon you by any law, rule, or regulation. This is completely self-regulated in terms of how an organization strategically positions itself in this manner.
That would be the ideal. That would be the ideal. Of course, I was talking earlier about the difficult strategic refocusing. We have to admit, I mean, business in the free economies, in the free world, for too many years was built on the Friedman model. Profit, profit, profit.
Milton Friedman.
Exactly. And we making the move to Freeman with the stakeholder theory, it's a huge change. I mean, it may sound easy, but it's a huge change. Yeah. So, in fact, because we're too late with taking measures, it's not enough for, I mean, ideally, as I said, self-regulation and self-regulatory initiatives should be able to do the job, but it will and it does require regulation. It requires regulation because it's a major shift, changing the mindset of shareholders and saying it's not only about you, it's about the well-being of the people working here, it's about the well-being of the society around you, it's about your social license to operate. And in essence, building up this capital when things go wrong, because things will go wrong for many organizations, this is life, you can spend some of this capital and people could accept you trying to fix things and give you a second option if you have this capital. If you don't have this capital, they will not. They will go after you, and especially the young people. And I think this is promising because what we see with the millennials and the younger generations is that they will not accept excuses. I mean, if they really feel that the company is not doing what they should be doing, they will not shop with the company, and this is a very strong push for the companies to change. I keep telling young people, keep doing that, because this is in essence the most important driver for the companies to change, because they realize that they will not be relevant in the future for the consumer, and that's it's a survival thing. It's not a it
becomes an end game.
Exactly.
Of course, Freeman wrote, if I'm not mistaken, his stakeholder theories in the early 80s, but the resistance, I guess, from the other model has delayed, I guess,
exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Process to be implemented.
That's why I'm saying that unfortunately we need regulation, and we need the regulators to guide.
It would help. It would help.
It would help. It will help because we know that it's deeply rooted. The way we train people, the way we train managers, it has to go back to education, to the business schools, to change the curricula. Of course, there are efforts, but we are not talking about, for most of the universities, about curricula that is based on the idea of sustainable business. We hear all these examples of startups which are purely based on sustainable, and of course this is great. This is promising for the future, but I always say that we don't have the time to wait for the big companies of today to go out of business, and then we will have this new sustainable business. We need to change the Titanic that is going to the iceberg to turn it. And it's not easy because it's deeply rooted. We need to change mindsets.
The big ships, heavy ships.
Exactly. And then, you are in communication. You know that culture will not change just because we say we change culture. You need regulation, you need strategies, you need to guide people. And I was also saying recently that we need to get to a point where a sales manager will not only have targets and commission on sales, but also targets on limiting the use of energy, limiting the traveling, and so on and so forth. We need to turn it into their paycheck at the end of the day, their targets to include also sustainability. And this is how people will change. Absolutely. And eventually it will become culture because, and I worked for many years in recycling and trying to get people to recycle. And I always said, looking at what happened in the other countries, you have communication that will do a certain job, then you need incentives, and then you need disincentives for people who do not do it. And, I was always saying, I don't care why they do it. If they do it, they will stick to it. Firstly, because changing from a habit to a habit, the new habit becomes the status quo. And secondly, they know what they're doing is good. They know that recycling is good. They just don't do it because changing habits is not easy. And eventually that becomes culture. Different habits in life becomes culture. And then they internalize that, and they will tell you they do it for the environment, although they did it because there was a penalty or there was an incentive, there was something in it for them.
Right.
But when they do it, they internalize it and they say they do it for the environment. And I don't care why they do it, as long as they do it. I'm interested about the result.
But it's also very important that, it comes initially externally, and that motivation, therefore, is external. As you say, maybe it's a disincentive or it's an incentive, whatever. It could be fear appeal, whatever the case may be. Until ultimately it turns into this internal motivation where you feel like you're part of that environment and you're doing it for the right reasons. Maybe that's when it shifts to a habit.
Exactly.
I don't know.
They know it's good. They know they should be doing that. The people do not like to change. We know that. They will keep doing what they did all these years.
Yeah.
And, a lot of these people are bright people who have been trained to do that. So we need to change that mindset. And it's not easy because it's deeply, deeply rooted.
It's deeply rooted. Going back to this shareholder resistance, though, would you argue that the fact that they are now on a global scale, on a corporate global scale, throughout the industrial complex, are they just now starting to, agree more to sustainable goals because of the consumer pressure? I mean, for example, the newer generations, as you say, are looking consciously to have an exchange with these organizations. Is that where that pressure is coming from? Or are older generations just, finding ways finally to, persuade themselves or to find means to sort of say, okay, maybe we should be looking at this too? Or again, does it make a difference?
Well, I think it's on both ends. Of course, there is older people that realize how important it is to make this transformation. We've heard recently the cases of activist investors who joined the board of directors to impose a change in the strategy of the organization, which is, again, very promising as well.
It's interesting you say that because there's a growing literature on CEO activists.
Yeah. Or even investors. There was a recent case recently in the States where an investor joined the company, the shareholding, and he was an activist investor trying to change the route of the organization through being in a position to make decisions. I still, though, see a lot of pressure from the younger generations, and I think is making a significant difference. I've been working with multinationals in the last few years internationally for the recycling systems, and if I go 2-3 years back, not very long.
Mm.
Of course, they were asking us to look into the systems and try to help them find the most efficient systems, the cheapest way to meet the targets, and so on. In the last few years, we keep listening to companies asking for increasing recycled content in their products, self-committing to higher targets, because in the European Union we now have, with the Single-Use Plastics Directive, for example, specific percentage of recycled content in specific products, plastic products. But companies are self-committing to higher targets on that, and they are pushing hard, and they just want the material to increase the recycled content. They will not be so pushy on the cost. They just want the material. And I think it's clearly realizing that for the future, the relevance of the product to the market will be significantly affected by this recycled content.
Yeah.
So I think it's getting to a point where, as I said, it's becoming thinking of the future as a survival tactic rather than let's do something for the environment. Unless we do something for the environment, the society will reject the product. And this is a very strong incentive for the companies.
Yeah. How can I ask, do organizations come to make the decision on what their sustainability pillars are, on what that strategy is? And what, for example, does it mean if it's something more aligned to the company, but not necessarily to issues which alleviate climate change?
Well, the essence is to try and, first of all, map the stakeholders, all those that are affected by the company, and then also get their feedback, get also the internal feedback from the people in the organization, and try to find out of those issues that are in the sustainable development goals, which are the most relevant to the organization, find the gaps in getting to the level they should be in terms of sustainability, and then having a strategy to bridge those gaps. And of course, this is an ongoing thing, because when you solve one problem, you have to focus on the next one, and so on. This is what we call usually the materiality assessment, where you basically look at the key issues. And when I say look, I mean look internally and look with the stakeholders. And this process is usually new for most of the companies, talking to so many stakeholders and trying to see what do they think about the company, how are they affected. So it's a consultative process. And of course, we are moving eventually into a double materiality assessment. We are looking what are the impacts of the company, and then now we're looking what are the impacts of the environment, the rest of the world on the company, and we try to find the key issues, and of course prepare a strategy to gap them, to bridge the gaps that we find in this double materiality assessment. That at the end becomes the strategy of the company, which at the end will reflect in the vision, the mission, and the KPIs and the KPIs of the company. And of course, if the company, and this is for many companies an obligation in terms of reporting. We have currently an obligation in the European Union for companies more than 500 people to prepare a sustainability report every year. I think first quarter of next year, we should have the new directive, which will lower the level to 250 people. So many more smaller companies will have an obligation to report. And we are also eventually getting to a point where we're discussing integrated reporting, which will mean that the reporting coming out will not be financial reporting only, but it will be also sustainability reporting with the financial reporting. So you look at the overall impact of the 3 Ps: people, profit, planet. You look at the whole spectrum.
And what from there's the sustainability aspect, embedding all of that within the culture, from the product line to how employees are treated, and so on and so forth. Governance, and then that could be like a basis. That could be, if we were looking at the different levels, for example, Carroll's pyramid. This, in a way, is just a way of minimizing the negatives, but to go above and beyond, to move on to that ethical element, the philanthropy element. how hard of a leap is that? I mean, because as you had mentioned earlier, this is where maybe some resistance will come in from shareholders. It takes money. What is your experience with this?
Fortunately, a lot of the things we do when we build a sustainability strategy, especially for the environmental issues, they don't cost money, they save money. If you save energy, traveling, if you use alternative sources of energy, it saves money as well. It's not something that you always need to spend money. Of course, if you have an industrial organization that needs to change systems and so on, there is investments and there is, of course, support, especially with the new strategic programs of the European Union, circular economy, Green Deal, and so on. There will be lots of money for this kind of research and investment and so on. But in essence, this discussion with the greater stakeholder many times helps a lot in changing the way of thinking. You get to know for the first time, and we usually say it's the time to listen. Listen to the rest of the people, listen to the society, listen to the people that buy your products, buy your service. What do they want? What do they expect from you? What do they think of the future of your company? And at that point, you may start realizing that I'm focusing on the wrong things, and eventually I will not be relevant to my customers, to those that I target. And you get to a point where, of course, you take the measures. Some things will cost, some things will bring money. But eventually, you need to think also of what do you leave behind? What do you do for the society? We keep saying that CSR is not corporate philanthropy. And of course, the idea is to target your interventions in the areas where you have impacts. So if, for example, you create a lot of CO2 through your operation, you need to do something for that. If you put a lot of packaging in the market, you need to focus your efforts on that, because these are where your key impacts are. So depending on what you do and what your impacts are, you need to focus on those areas. And of course, you need to invest in improving that, improving the way you do business so that you do not create so much impact, or try to minimize some of that impact by doing something that can counter that.
And just recently, the Sustainability Goals report has just come out, and I think that the pandemic has had a negative.
Yeah, it's the first time we went back.
We've gone back as a European Union, as a region. You mean? Or
Europe as Europe. But I suppose it's the same for the globe as well.
Why is that? What have been the issues there?
Well, there were positive issues as well during the pandemic, in the sense that a lot of the industrial production slowed down, lots of use of oil.
That's what comes to my mind.
There were significant impacts. And for example, if you look at the Earth Overshoot Day, which is this measure that tells you in which date during the year we have already spent all the resources we should spend for the whole year. And this has been going down from November in the 70s, 80s. It went to July, which means that
in 2020.
In 2019, it was July. In 2020, it went back to August. It was the first time that it went back because we were not using so many resources. Of course. When we tell people that, they kind of think, okay, but should we expect the pandemic? No, of course. What that says is that we need to stop using primary resources so much, which means that, of course, we will not stop consumption. We can limit consumption, but we cannot cut it to half. We need to use more secondary resources. So we need to build systems for circularity, recycling, and so on. We need to use more secondary resources. But there were positive effects in that sense. But overall, a lot of single-use plastics was put on the market, and of course, there were no systems for this plastic. It was totally new. It was, masks. It was gloves. It was different things that had and they have a negative impact on the environment, and I'm sure different other issues that have been negatively affecting the Sustainable Development Goals. What is important in that report, and what is important for Cyprus, over and above the impacts of the pandemic, is that if you look at the rating, at the list of the countries and the rating, where they are in the uptake of SDGs, we are very low.
We are low.
We are very low, and that should ring a bell because, and of course, if you look at the countries that are higher than us, you kind of think, but why are we so delaying this transformation? So we need to get our act together. We should stop talking a lot and doing more action.
Can I throw that back at you? I mean, why are we delaying? What's been the problem?
Well, let me talk mostly about the environment, which is my area.
Yeah.
When we joined the EU, it was a shock because we joined a group where the environment is, if not the first portfolio in terms of importance, it's between the 1 to 3 top portfolios, whereas for us it was not a priority. And apparently and unfortunately, and that for all the governments that went after we joined the EU, it never became a real priority. We are usually trying to avoid fines by doing minimum and running to do minimum at the last minute. And that is reflected in everything we do about the environment. So it's not a real priority. We are pushed, and fortunately, I mean, it's fortunate that we are pushed by the European Union. But if you look at the progress reports as well, you realize that still we are given the direction. And of course, you will not always oppose things for you, but they will tell you what you could do or what you should do. But if you don't do it, or if you don't do it timely, the result is negative. You will be lagging behind, and time goes by, and we think that we have 10 years, 5 years to do that. But if you don't take action, 5 and 10 years, they go very quickly. I mean, we joined in 2004, it's 2021.
Yeah.
And we are still way behind in many things. I work now in countries that are way behind Cyprus. And I'm, many times I find myself saying, okay, I know that if we were not in the EU, and I'm talking countries not in the European Union, and I always think that if we were not in the European Union, we would be worse than that. So we've changed things because of the European Union, but we do it only to avoid problems with the European Union.
So you would identify the issues as being mainly socio-cultural, or
I think it's governance. First of all,
governance.
It's governance. A lot of these things, especially when you have a society that traditionally was not geared doing that, you expect the authorities to guide the process, to guide people what they need to do, to find solutions, to give solutions, to communicate, to explain, to have infrastructure, new infrastructure, and guide people to use the infrastructure. We tried to do a lot of things in the wrong way. By the time we realized, we lost years.
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to fix things, but we're not moving quickly. I was saying recently that if I go back when we joined the European Union, we're discussing, the government was discussing in 2002 before we joined, how are we going to fix the governance for the environment? And of course, at the time, the discussion was, okay, most of the European countries have a ministry for the environment. But because of the constitution and the political issue, we cannot touch on the constitution and change it. So let's have a sub-ministry. And they said, no, because of the constitution, we cannot have a sub-ministry. Let's think of something else. And they were discussing how within the public service they would place environment.
Yeah.
From 2002 until today, we found ways and we created 4 or 5 sub-ministries for different issues, but not for the environment.
Yeah.
That gives you an idea of how, what's the priority.
It's a sad story.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Story.
And I mean, it's no coincidence that we have the problems we have. It's because it's not a priority and it has not been a priority.
If I had to guess, Cyprus could be seen in its own industrial kind of framework as a country whereby we don't feel as we are responsible for a lot of the issues of climate change. So could that have been a factor in all of this? It's it rings a bell also with, for example, countries which are only now growing their or their own industrial complex. COP26 in India, for example, comes to mind. Why should we now pay the price of what the West has been doing for so many years. For example,
And it's not only that. Huh? It's not only that. It's this feeling I find in what they say that you made you improved and you advanced as countries and you created health, wealth for people and so on through the Industrial Revolution. And now that we go through our Industrial Revolution, you kick the ladder. You went on the top and you kick the ladder. You don't want us to get there. Of course, in countries like India, there is apparently a very strong activist, many groups, activist groups that are pushing for the environmental transformation. And of course, we eventually, with technology, we're finding ways to avoid all, or not all, but avoid many of the negative impacts of the industrialization, using energy from solar, from water, from alternative sources, doing things in a cleaner way, and so on.
The circular economy you mentioned.
Circular economy, resources, and so on. And I think, for example, because of some of these countries like China and India, they have a very significant environmental problem themselves. They make steps. They may not follow all the agreements because they have all these issues about the way they are treated versus how the rest of the world built up their wealth in the past. But for example, China decided the China ban, the Green Wall, 2-3 years ago, that created lots of problems for us in the recycling business. But they said, we're not accepting your waste anymore. You treat your waste and we can take secondary resources. And that was a realization that they, along with the secondary resources, they imported a percentage of the waste of the rest of the world in their country. And that created a lot of problems. So they are taking steps. Of course, what we have in Cyprus is this feeling of all these small places that we are a very small factor in all this.
Therefore,
why should we? If these people who run the industrial and the big factories, they will not change, how can we change? But of course, this is the same story with every other story. I mean, each and every one of us has to do their little bit about it. And of course, we can use our cars less, we can use electric cars, we can use a bicycle, all those issues that create a lot of CO2 emissions. And of course, primarily, and we were talking earlier about the sad story, think about the energy issue. I had the discussion recently with the guy in charge of climate change at the ministry, and I asked specifically, what is the cost for CO2 emissions for the Electricity Authority of Cyprus? And he said, expected to be more than 200 million euros. Now, 200 million euros is 1.2, 1.3 of the GDP of the country because we are using oil. And this is not discussed. People are not put in the spotlight for not making decisions early in a country that we have 330 days of sunshine.
Why isn't it discussed?
Why isn't it discussed? We're talking, and I was making this parallel with this guy from the ministry saying, okay, I recently heard that the cost of COVID for the country was 125 million euros. The cost of CO2 emissions, it's half, and it's every year. It's now selling more than $90 per ton, and EAC has around 3,000 tons to buy. So, talking about more than 250 million euros every year.
That could be the start of an interesting social solar factory industry, right? The creation of solar farms. And
if you think of all the let's say the public buildings, if you think of how many public buildings we have with a flat roof, and they are not full of photovoltaics, it gives you an answer to all this. There is different interests, and a lot of delays. Why? We're talking about a lot of money. It's not just an environmental issue. And of course, what we're trying to do eventually to gap this problem we have with the environment, where the impacts are further, and the externalities that the cost is not paid by the people who create the problem, through the regulation and this trading of CO2 schemes, CO2 emissions. We try to bring these externalities forward and make it a financial issue so that things change. But here we have a significant financial impact, and still people are not discussing it. People are not thinking why we didn't have natural gas when we should have it. And now the funny thing is that we have all this discussion about our reserves of natural gas. By the time, if we manage to get it out, it will be obsolete because Europe is going away from all the fossil fuels.
Yes, of course. If they don't pull out, the companies they're starting to pull out.
It will be obsolete by the time we bring it out because we need to move into
unfortunate, but
decarbonization.
Yeah. I understand it's a very complex issue. We say why, we put the problem there on the table and we discuss why and we discuss what can be done. But it's, of course, multi-layered and very complex. And it's ingrained in the various structures of society. I get all that. But maybe, and here is maybe a ray of hope, the majority of the people listening to this particular podcast are millennials, are Gen Zs, and so younger generations, basically. And we live in a democracy, so shouldn't that be the message? Let's look at who we should be voting for, who we should be putting forward as our leaders, and make conscious efforts to choose the right leaders, right? And again, I know that things happen slowly, and it's not an ideological issue that I'm bringing on the table here at the moment. It's just an overall way of understanding who and why we should be doing things if we want to make a difference.
Of course, yeah. I am a political animal. I think politically, and what I'm very concerned about the evolution, especially and you are in communication. I'm talking about the democracy in the age of social media, and I really I think we need to learn democracy from scratch, because in the age of social media, the influencers and those who can actually have an impact, they sit behind the keyboard. You don't know who they are. You don't know their intentions. And of course, we all also have all these abuse of data and the use of profiling of people to direct specific messages to specific people. I think it's a very interesting evolution in democracy. I don't know if it will be for the good or for the bad. We need to learn democracy from scratch. And of course, ideally, we should be able to scrap information because there is wealth of information. And of course, a lot of that is scrap information. And we should be able to scrap information, but not everybody will be able to scrap information. And that makes it a difficult mixture. Ideally, we should be voting for the right people. I think in the last 10 years, we saw the exact opposite, especially in big countries with a lot of power and a lot of power in the hands of these people who were elected. So I think democracy in the age of social media, it's something that we need to learn from scratch. It can go the exact opposite way of what we're just saying, that we should be looking at voting for people who can do something positive. It can go exactly the opposite. And we were discussing before we started the discussion about USA, that we both spent time studying there, that how it's gone back instead of forward in terms of mindsets.
Yeah, it's true that social media or rather they have played their role in the disempowerment of liberal democracies around the world. It hasn't been the only reason, of course. Other issues have brought populists and have polarized societies, but definitely they have played their role. But still, I see this particular problem, climate issues, as a common problem. If there are agents around the world who want to interfere in democratic processes, I get that. It's one thing. And, to cause ruptures in societies in Europe. And I know that this is happening, and in all countries have their issues with this. But this is a common problem. We just mentioned earlier, for example, China has created its own reform measures, as has India, and as has, different regions in the world. This should be something which it's just a matter of, okay, here is the right person or the right team or the right government to get us out of this mess, or to at least reverse the negative impact, to keep us on 1.5 and not to take us higher in terms of temperature, which would cause chaos.
And I think very few people believe that we can stay below 1.5. I was asking this question in a lot of people who are in the area of the environment, and most of the people really fear that cannot be sustained below 1.5. And of course, the problem is that the general society does not realize that the difference between 1.5 and 1.6 is humongous, and the difference between 1.5 and 2 is unbelievable. I was looking recently at
it moves into dystopia. Basically.
Yeah. I was looking at some of the models for the evaluation of the financial sector, sustainability and climate change evaluation that are coming up from the European Central Bank. And if you look at the scenario of the temperature rise to 3 degrees, it's unbelievable what will happen. I think people many times, we try. It's an issue of defense. You try to think of the issues that directly impact you without trying to think of, okay, what are the bigger, the general concerns, and unless you feel it close to you. And of course, we do see a lot of changes many times happening over time, and we don't realize that they are related to climate change. For example, Cyprus is now an area of mega fires. We had last summer a big fire. In 5.5 hours, it burned the whole area. We have very dry summers. We have, I remember I was young and we had more than 40 degrees 2-3 days in the summer.
Now
It was
common element of the summer.
No, it's a month, more than a month. It's 5 weeks, 6 weeks.
Extended periods
42,
of drought.
40, exactly. And there is less moisture in the trees, less moisture on the ground. So the fire will burn much faster.
It's happening.
It's happening.
Not
it's
something
happening.
which
yeah,
will.
Yeah, exactly.
But
It's the story with the frog. Yeah, you warm the water slowly, and the frog will become soup. If you put it, you have to feel the pressure. I think there should be more communication of the areas that have a more direct impact. For example, I was preparing a few months back for a presentation, and I found this issue of Jakarta in Indonesia, the capital with 11 million people. They are already building a new capital because it's the water goes up 25 centimeters every year, 2.5 meters in 10 years. So they realize that very soon they have to leave the area and go to some. That's alarming. And of course, I heard this story from the guy from the ministry I was saying earlier, who's in charge of climate change, and I was asking him. He was in Glasgow, and he was in the previous 2 or 3 as well. So I was asking him what was the highlight, and he said the highlight was a leader. I don't remember the country; it's a small country, but a leader who did his speech over the internet. He was in the sea. The water was up to his knees, and he said, 10 years ago, this area was a beach. So some areas are already feeling that. And recently, in one of the discussions we had, somebody asked Andreas Viras, the mayor of Larnaca. He said that the first area in Cyprus that will go underwater is the area where the airport is. What are you planning to do? I said, they will make it a Venetia.
What can you do?
What can you do? When you feel it, it makes much more impact. And maybe we need to highlight these areas where, it's happening. It's there. I mean, they're losing a city of 11 million people. And if you look at the maps, which parts of the United States will be lost underwater, which parts of other countries will be lost. It has an impact. Again, you need to bring forward, because with the environment you have this time gap.
Yeah, and we suffer from recency bias, I think.
Exactly.
So we started this discussion by looking at the corporate landscape and how consumers, our role as consumers, has forced or persuaded or has played its role in making many large corporations change their mindset to do the right thing, to create sustainability departments, and so on. So our role as a consumer, I feel, has been successful, but our role as a citizen, maybe we can do more, going back to looking at the more recent things in terms of, again, who you vote, who are our leaders, etc. We are coming to a close, but as I said, this has been a podcast for mainly younger, millennials and even Gen Zs. Is there any last message you want to give them?
Well, if we talk about our role as citizens, unfortunately, what we see with younger generations in terms of the politics is the apathy. They don't seem to care. They tend to feel that whoever is there will do their thing and things will not change. But this is not true. In reality, the strength we have in democracy with the vote can change a lot of things. And we see, for example, just think of the states of Trump and the states of Biden. And I'm not saying that Biden is doing everything right, but there is a significant difference. So the vote, it's a strong thing we have in our hand. And of course, apathy will just give the wrong people the chance to get in the seats and make decisions for us, and they make decisions for our future. So we need to take action, and of course getting involved and or at least participating and taking a stand on what's happening. It's very critical.
Yeah. This has been a podcast interview with Kyriakos Parpounas, Head of Sustainability at Grant Thornton, Cyprus. Kyriakos, thank you so much for your time here today.
Thank you very much for having me in your series of podcasts.
Thank you. The aim of the project, End Climate Change, Start Climate of Change, is to raise awareness of young EU citizens in the critical understanding of migration caused by climate change, as it is considered one of the biggest challenges in the world. Through the implementation of the project, the Research Foundation of the University of Nicosia aims to inform the young citizens of Cyprus about the relationship between the economic system in which we live, our way of life, and the human impact on climate change in the world south. The project is funded by the European Commission under the program Development Education and Awareness Raising, DEAR, of the European Union. For more information, you can go to climateofchange.info/Cyprus. My name is Nicoli, and thank you so much for your time.